All right. John, your camera just went out, but we are about to begin another episode of this astounding investigation into the assassination attempt against Donald Trump. John, do we have you there? Your camera's out. John was just there a second ago. He'll be with us in a second. Everybody knows that John and I have been doing this series for the past 2 weeks, almost every single night. We start here, and then we have a sponsor-exclusive segment. People can watch that on subscribestar.com/IamJohnCullen, patreon.com/IamJohnCullen, odyssey.com/@crowdsourcethetruth, Substack, of course, Subscribestar, and Patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. And I've seen some disgruntled people who are annoyed that we won't share this information openly and for free. Everything should be free. But John and I need to purchase food. So people who appreciate this show and the research that we've been doing and the shows that we produce, they don't mind paying $3 or $5 a month. It helps keep the research going. Now, John, I was just watching a few minutes ago a video produced by somebody I think you've heard of, Chris Martenson. He was speaking with a guy that's been blowing up across the internet. I'm talking about Dave Stewart. I think a lot of people saw this video that Dave shot. He was positioned right near the American Glass Research Building, and everybody has seen the video. Why don't you tell us what you found? You've got the video right at the top of your Twitter, right?
Well, if you want, we'll end up referring to it later in the show. So when we go to the patron-only portion, we're going to break it down, in detail. But the net of it is, we looked at this video a day or two ago. First, we had this really crappy version that had his text all over the front of it. Then he posted a new version of it that was not quite as crappy.
What was different about the new version?
Well, the first version looked like a TikTok video, and there was text all over the front. The second version that he posted, there's only text on the bottom.
I did this stabilization. Is this the first version or the second version?
Second. That's the second.
Okay. Yeah, and without that text, it would stabilize even better. And this is only 1280-720, so somewhere Dave Stewart is going to have a higher resolution, lower compression, and unmolested version of this video that I really would like to see. I think there's a lot more critical analysis that could be done to this with the original video. But you found stuff in here. Tell us what you found.
Well, again, like the Vegas shooting. So it's important for people to understand this, that at the Vegas shooting, most of the videos that we were working with were either eyewitness videos that kind of look like this, shaking all over the place, and were a mess, or body cam footage that was coming from the Las Vegas Metro Police Department that they had already scrubbed and redacted parts of the screen and redacted parts of the audio. And it's we were like, what are you going to do? You got to play the hand they deal you. So, you get 2s and 7s. It's like, where are you going with that? Nowhere. But you grind it out. And the net of it is, even using their monkeyed with stuff, I was still able to find evidence that we've got another room with a broken window, things of that nature, right? Things that they didn't scrub. And so I think we're dealing with the same kind of situation here, that most people watching this aren't like me. And that's because I'm not like most people. I mean, I'm kind of like King Kong, and you went to the jungle and brought me back, dude. And it's like, it's not fair to everybody else.
You're in the cage at the theater.
Yeah. It's like I behave with you. Yeah, I behave with you, but that's about it.
Sometimes.
And, barely. But the net of this is, I don't really think like other people, right? We have a joke that we use as sort of our touchstone from my dear friend, Stephen Wright. I wish he was a dear friend, actually. I just think the guy's amazing. And Stephen Wright is sitting in a bar. I'll let him do the bit. Stephen Wright's sitting in a bar next to a woman. She looks at him and looks down.
She said, "You're wearing 2 different color socks." I said, "Yes, but to me they're the same because I go by thickness."
And so that's kind of how I do things. I do things a little bit differently. So while everybody else is so certain of what's going on in Dave Stewart's video, I look at it completely differently. And I'm going to show you guys what I did, how I did it, and how I came to the conclusions that I came to. And I think you're going to be stunned, because I think I've identified the shooter. And I think I can tell you. who this is.
Why don't we start with the bottom line up front? You got to tell people what
Indeed.
you're talking about, because people have seen these flashes in the window, right? But what is? Oh,
let's go to the deck. I'll show you guys from the deck. Yeah. So let me kind of set it up from the deck, and then when we go to the Patreon only portion, we're going to be going through a number of videos, and I'll tell you guys what the videos are going to be. But let's start with the deck, and the deck kind of tees it up and explains the process. So you should have that PDF somewhere, right?
It's coming up.
Okay. So originally, we had video taken from pretty much straight on the podium. I put a video together. I count out the shots. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And I hear this other thing right after this 5, 6, 7, 8. And then I hear, psh, I'm like, what the hell was that? And I denote that in the video. Chris Martenson uses this video as sort of the cornerstone of his first video. And, you know, from this, I think they did the audio analysis. I think Mike Adams did the Audacity from this
without ever
audio.
mentioning you, by the way. They don't say, hey, this is John Cullen's video. He put this together.
No.
They don't care that. Yeah, interesting point. Sorry.
And by the way, you know, at some point tonight, maybe when we go to the Patreon only portion, I'll ask you to do an advanced search and show everybody all the times I've tried to get Chris Martenson's attention about COVID, and he just ignored the guy who built the mapping system. All right, so net of it is the original countdown of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then what was this last shot that was like 8 seconds later? All right, so that's what we thought was happening. And that's not what was happening. And Brett Weinstein said something to me when I did the interview with him about a week ago Friday, and it just kept sticking with me, And he said, we see the puff of smoke on the railing at the same exact instant we hear the bang. He says, shouldn't there be some delay? I was like, you're right. And this is what got me looking for shots that we couldn't hear. And you and I started exploring something called 300 blackout subsonic suppressed. And we started getting specific and looking into it. We watched videos of guys shooting it, and it was like, wow, that's pretty quiet. And the reason is because an AR-15 and 223, they don't make subsonic ammo. You can't go subsonic with a 223. So if you're going to shoot something subsonic, it needs to be a round that can go subsonic. Well, 22 long rifle, but that's not what they're going to use.
See, this is why details are so important, John. See, I don't know anything about guns, but I see what Chris Martenson is doing. He's talking about a video. He's calling it a film. He's looking at the roof. He's identifying that as crooks. This guy is jumping to conclusions. I like where you're going with what you're saying here.
All right, so the net of this is one of the things that I guess I'm becoming somewhat famous for is the mea culpa, which is where I tell everybody how I got this wrong, I got that wrong. And that just goes with having Asperger's. It's like I don't really have much of an ego. I'm ready to
being reasonable. Hang on now. That goes with being reasonable. You're not married to an outcome. We're just looking at evidence and wherever it goes. If somebody's in the trees, if somebody's in the room, if it's a police officer shooting a subsonic gun, we didn't come up with this. We're just looking at the evidence.
If 3 days ago I told you, there's a shooter on a horse, you would say,
there's a horse.
Now we got to check out a horse. Right. Okay. So,
guy's up a tree.
Exactly.
Could be anything.
Right. Sounds nutsy. All right, so let's go to the next slide. Let's go to the next slide in the deck. And one of the things that does become evident in his video is the wind speed.
Dave Stewart's video? Okay.
Dave Stewart's
video.
Why is that?
So, what about it does that?
He points his camera at the flag. And so we can see this flag blowing similarly in the video as Trump is talking. And that's a big deal. All right, because that means a lot of people are like, how did all these guys miss?
Too windy.
That's how they missed. Because
let's understand this. Is this like flying a drone? If it's this windy and you're out to shoot and it's not, we have to kill somebody, this is just pointless, we're not going to do it today?
No, but again, it's like if I went to the range and it's blowing like this and I'm shooting across that wind from the build. So you got to understand the building's out to the side there, right? They're shooting across this wind. Which way is the wind blowing the bullets? Away from his right ear.
It could change at any minute, right?
It doesn't change. It's a steady breeze, and it's blowing 10 to 12 knots towards the stage, meaning as the bullet comes to the president's right ear, the wind is blowing it away from his ear. And so these guys are trying to figure out how much windage or how high they're trying to aim into the wind and curve the bullet towards the target. And they're not getting it because it's tough to shoot in 10 or 12 knots of wind. I'm familiar with flags because when we shoot, we put flags up. This is the first thing you do, is you put up the flags, and it's the last thing you do is put the flags away. So I'm used to reading flags. When I see a flag this size blowing horizontally, that's 10 miles an hour of wind. That's a 10-mile-an-hour breeze. So if you get a 10-mile-an-hour breeze and he's shooting across it, that's maximum deflection. So that's what saved the president's life. One click on the scope, if the shooters have a scope, I can't tell yet, or it's just the wind. So that's what this is all about. So the net of this also, let's go to the next slide, because the next slide is what I used for the photogrammetry. So this next slide is almost a perfect top-down parallax ideal view for photogrammetry.
Yeah, I would bet that's the reason the person shot it this way.
Well, they flew the drone over, and they know to get some of this. Right? So go to the next slide. And what I did was I laid that in to Google Earth. And in laying that in with Google Earth, I was able to share some of my stuff with a gentleman on Twitter who was just an absolute rock star. And so if you guys have ever seen like the sketches that they do when they're making a film, that they'll do like, what do they call what they're called? The storyboard, right?
Storyboards, yeah.
All right. So we had a show with Lee Stranahan the other day, and in order for me to be able to communicate with Lee in storyboard type form so that Lee and I have something to work off of, I needed a sketchbook. I needed a sketch pad of my own to be able to meet with Lee and say, hey, can we do this here? Can I move this there? If we put the camera here. So I want to show people, let's go to the next slide. Tonight I'm going to be showing you my sketchbook. And this is what it looks like, right? So we're already sketching out the venue in 3D. And you can go next slide too. We got a couple slides here. So we're putting the counter snipers on the roof. We've got the water tower. We got the bleachers set at the correct heights because we're scaling everything using photogrammetry. So using the photogrammetry, that's how we're scaling everything and getting everything nailed down to the, like we're on it. We now know where the podium is. We've got the height of the podium. We've got the windows on the building, the heights of the windows of the building. And we got cameras in those windows in the building. We got cameras at the shooter's position. We've got this ready. All right. So now Lee takes Unreal Engine and makes this look like what it looked like. So this is my sketch pad. This is just to be able to pivot so that I can get on a Zoom call with Lee and say, okay, I got the guy in the white shorts is here. So in fact, this camera that you see now, this image is taken from, let's see, which one are you at? Now that's where David Dutch and Copenhaver were. And the slide above it is where the guy in the white shorts is. So we've placed cameras where the various people, we have a camera where Corey was, we have a camera where the guy in the white shorts was, we have a camera where the Copenhaver and Dutch were. So this is the type of thing that we're doing for precision. This is about precision. And if you go to the next slide, we'll talk about the opposite of precision, which is called getting it wrong. So the distance from the podium to the shooter on the roof, based on all this photogrammetry and, as you see, solid modeling and all the stuff that we're doing here, is 472 to 473 feet based on whether we're measuring to the kid's head or to the tip of his rifle. All right, so if the rifle comes out. Now, what you're going to see tonight is that it's quite possible that the kid on the roof didn't take a single shot and died from a counter sniper shot before anybody knew what was going on. This changes everything, changes the time frame, changes the sequence, the number of shots that were fired. I'm going to show you evidence tonight that the kid on the roof did not fire a single shot, was spotted by the counter snipers, And the second he lifted his head over the ridge, they put him down. The second he lifted his head up over the ridge of that roof and poked his head up, it was lights out. And I'm going to show you guys this. So that's some of the evidence we're going to be looking at in the show. But go back up to that slide where Chris Martinson was talking about the distance to the podium. The reason this is really important is when you do the crack-thump measurements, right? We're doing crack-thump measurements to figure out how far is the shooter. That's the whole reason we do it. So if you tell everybody that the distance to the shooter is this, but it's not, well, no wonder everything would seem like it falls into place, but it's not. That's not the right measurement. So if the measurement's 475 feet, well, that changes things. Or if it's 472 feet, it's still significantly different. And we don't have to change anything else here. Crack thump time is 0.22. We all agree that. 3,100 feet per second, rough and tough. Fair enough. That yields a distance that's not at the kid. So the crack thump evidence says there's no shots coming from the roof. They're coming from the facade of the building, like in the thumbnail. Isn't that odd? Like in the thumbnail. So the crack thump distance only reaches to the edge of the building where we see the windows. So now our friend Gerald on the next slide, Jerry on the next slide. Gerald is a historic landscape architect. This is the guy you call when New York City Department of Parks needs to fix Central Park and they forgot what Frederick Law Olmsted drew up, and they bring in somebody like Gerald. Gerald is a historic landscape architect. He's studying the film and he says, hey, what is this?
Video.
Yeah. And he was studying the crappy one. This is the original TikTok.
There's no film. This kid, DJ Stewart, I don't think he's ever even seen a piece of film in his life.
Okay,
he just turned 20.
I didn't mean to insult you. I'm sorry.
Doesn't insult me. I just want us to be accurate to what we're dealing with. No, this is evidence. It's a video.
Okay. So Gerald looks at the video, says, what is this pinpoint light source? I go and investigate, and I start going frame by frame. All right. The video on the next page, we've got Axios picks up the story. So Axios does the Dave Stewart story and says he's trying to get a glimpse and why it matters and blah, 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 blah. And everybody's kind of focusing in the Dave Stewart video on how much police attention there is around the building. It's like, whoa, there's cops running around all over the place, and there's cops with their guns drawn, and there's cops running backwards, and there's cops running this way, and everybody's like, oh my goodness, oh my goodness, oh my goodness.
But wait a minute, let's address that for a second, because you see when I'm talking about evidence, people are like, oh, Jason's being a jerk, this is a video. There is evidence that can be gleaned from the video, such as what you're talking about. The reason why I'm being such a stickler about this is that if we want to go in here and start identifying, groups of 4 pixels and peaks and waveforms we're really going through and scrutinizing this thing closely. That's why I'm saying we've got to be precise in how we describe what we're doing, describe what the elements are, and for, depending on what we're looking for, getting to what we're getting to. But see, what you've just spoken about there, this evidence of the police being so obviously disorganized, and even when it's clear to everybody there, something really serious is going on the roof, there was no mechanism in place for the police around that building to notify the Secret Service sufficiently so they could remove Donald Trump from the stage. There's no excuse for that.
Not
All
true.
the math.
Not true.
What do you mean?
Not true. Not true. That's what you're being told.
Well, what happened? They didn't remove him.
Oh, yes, they did. The kid on the roof is dead before any of you hear a single shot. He's dead.
What I'm saying is when they're running around saying there's somebody on the roof, at
Secret
that
Service
moment,
is
Trump should have
already
left.
on it. Well, that's different. Trump
That's
should
what
have
I'm
taken.
saying. With the cops running around being disorganized, that's the evidence that I see in this video that doesn't matter if the guy runs it through the toilet. We can see the cops running around, and we hear the commotion, and we see. What I'm trying to establish is one element of evidence, aside from the bullets that we're going to talk about, is this disorganization of the police within and around this building. It's key to what is going on here today.
No doubt. No doubt. No doubt. No doubt. This is a magic trick. This is Darren Brown, baby. Let's go to the next slide. So our friend Dave Stewart, who spent his time today with somebody else instead of us, posted a new version of the video. And in the new version of the video, he doesn't have TikTok crap all over the front of it. So we are able to get slightly better images. But as Jason points out, it's still not what we're really looking for, because I can't really raise anything up in the shadows. And if I had the real stuff, we might be able to work with the shadows there. But the net of it is, we certainly do see an anomaly. Now, the issue is a lot of the big mouths are saying, yeah, but there's no gunfire at that time. And this is why we go by thickness. All right. So I don't measure like you morons do. I measure differently. I do it differently. And I'm better, quite frankly, because I solved the Vegas shooting. And none of you dipshits did. Nobody mentioned the helicopters, right? So everybody sit down and shut up. Let's go through the next 4 slides real quick. Bang, bang.
I actually remembered that joke. Funnier than it actually is. If the girl said to him, you know, your socks don't match, and then he said, I go by thickness, that's funnier than saying the color doesn't match. But anyway.
Yeah. All right, so let's look at these next 4 slides. So again, these are 4 different frames taken from the video. This is not proof of anything. This is evidence of something, right? There's evidence. And what we're going to do when we go to the patron-only portion of the show is I'm going to show you how I was able to correlate this with silence gunfire that nobody else has heard. Now, I think that other Ginger Frankenstein, the one who makes the pills all day, he's sitting there cranking out what chlorophyll
Mike
pills
Adams was commenting.
Adams.
This is actually very interesting. He brought up yesterday silenced gunfire.
Well, we've been talking about 300 blackout subsonic silenced for what, a week now, right? We're watching videos, so of course it's going to catch on. But yes, he did talk about it, and I've got it. And so when we go to the patron-only portion, we're going to be breaking down the Dave Stewart video at 1/10 speed. And at 1/10 speed, we pick up the silenced shots. And there are about a dozen of them, maybe more, meaning there's not 9 shots fired. There's about 20 shots being fired. There's a number of shots being fired before anybody knows a shot has been fired. And that's because it appears they're shooting at the snipers. The snipers then, the second the kid on the roof pokes his head up, boom, he's gone. He's out of there. End of story. I do not believe a single shot comes from the rooftop, and the crack-thump audio supports that. When we get to the patron-only portion of the show, I'm going to show you my hypothesis on who I believe is in that window behind that gun, and how we could have this person arrested tomorrow because this person has an identifying characteristic that I am going to divulge on the patron-only show.
That's amazing.
Now, I could be wrong. But I'm not wrong. Stick with us. When we get to the patron-only portion of the show, you guys are going to fall out of your chair. This is Darren Brown territory, and I know Darren Brown. I'm John Cullen. We'll be back with our patrons in just 5 minutes.